Greetings and welcome to Masters of Design. I'm your host, Lawrence E. Masters, and today we'll be looking at research, especially how it pertains to lighting design. Are you getting tired of this bit yet? Me too, but the set is here, the lights are focused, and the costume has yet to be laundered, so here we are. Let us begin with a line from the great William Shakespeare himself. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. This is true, too, for the designer. Over the course of their career, they will participate in many productions, and as time goes on, they will find that they will have to sometimes do the same production multiple times. However, each production comes with its own trials and tribulations, and it is up to the designer to get the director's concept across to the audience. The first step to any design is to read the play. Today, we are going to keep things simplified by using a production that most of us will be familiar with. We are going to gaze into the looking glass of one designer's journey as he completes multiple productions of Alice in Wonderland. Research. This is important in every aspect of design. Today, of course, I'm going to be focusing on lights, but if you're doing costumes, if you're doing sound, if you're doing set, really any aspect of the design process is going to need some research. So I gave myself 3 kind of over-the-top director prompts for where to send my brain when going and finding research. Mystery's Rule of Theater 211 is when doing research, don't start at other productions. I know I'm showing you pictures of other productions of Alice in Wonderland right now, but I really like to try and get my own brain ideas situated before I look at what other people have done. Now, if you come to a technical issue, you're like, I wonder how they got this to fly in. I wonder how they got this effect. That is when I will go to other productions. Rule of 211, I stay away from other productions when doing my initial research because I don't want it to corrupt my creativity. So we'll be going off these 3 different prompts. I will go over the research that I found, or some of the research I found, and specifically single out a few images for each and explain why I liked those or why those inspired me for this particular project. So assuming that we have all read the play, the next step is a meeting with the director. Alright, so Alice in Wonderland, how are we doing it?
So I got some news for you. I'm thinking we do it steampunk style. Big gears, cogs, all over the set.
Okay.
Maybe in different locations, we have the bowels of a furnace, like it's an old steel factory.
Okay.
And maybe another scene, we have an underwater submarine.
Is this all going to be set kind of stuff, or?
Oh no, this will all be done with the lights. My budget's very small and lights are much cheaper. You should know that.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, I think it's an interesting challenge.
The famous Alice in Wonderland scene where there's a big maze, clockwork maze.
What kind of theater are we in?
Well, definitely a black box theater.
Okay.
That's because I want to put my audience in the middle of the stage. And the set is going to be built around them. And the whole thing will be a giant gear that turns scene to scene. Think of it as a giant lazy Susan. Write that down. Giant lazy Susan.
Okay. What are we looking at budget-wise?
I got about $500.
The entire thing.
Oh, yes. Oh, and the most important thing, the light up, the costumes have to light up.
Costume just light up. Okay.
Think you can make it happen?
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, I think it's an interesting challenge.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
After meeting with the director, the next step is research. You now have the vision of the director and the needs of the script. It is time for you to find images that inspire you and give you direction in your design. These days, the internet is a wonderful resource for you to find research. Find images that speak to your creative process and give you visualizations of what you wish to get across on stage. The Steampunk Director. So the first one is kind of an art piece, a little clockwork guy here hanging out, seemingly working on a smaller piece of clockwork. But I think this one has a very evident light source, or two of them actually, because you have the outside and you have the little lantern. And I feel like the color here is very on par with the steampunk vibe. It's a lot of bronze and copper colored and gold, and you have some atmospheric effects up there in the top left hand corner, and it's kind of very industrial and metallic, and there's these rounded edges that have a lot of reflection to them. There's a lot of reflective surfaces, but none of them are very clean. It's kind of a dirty reflection, so you just get this amber light. And to me, this is a very steampunk image. You've got the gears, you've got the amber, you've got the kind of dirty light. And that's why I picked this one. So I think that this image would have a very clear influence on my color choice, in addition to giving me some ideas on what textures and gobos I might want to use. For one of the scenes, a submarine was suggested, so I was kind of curious how I would light the inside of a submarine. You know, because you have no, everything is artificial. There's no sunlight or anything. So these are some of the images of in the inside of submarines, and one of them is like a steampunk version of a submarine. So this helped me get into the mindset of what it might look like on the inside here. And you notice one is very bright, and again, artificial kind of fluorescent lighting going around, where the other one is a very deep amber feel that is very on par with our steampunk vibe we were going for already. But you just see all the different light sources and how the shadows play and just the machinery and mechanical nature of the entire thing. And the last image is an example of the lights and costumes that he asked for. Lights and costumes are the realm of the costumers, but it is very important to work with them because what you are doing with lights will be affected by what they are doing, and vice versa. It is always important to work with your costumer in any situation, but especially when lighting is actually going into the physical costumes, because lots of times you will have to change your lights to make sure that that effect really comes through, because the lights on a costume are not generally going to be as powerful as you have access to in your grid. So you have to make sure to make those pop, because those are kind of big moments when there's light up costumes. And here are just a few other images that I found that I didn't necessarily single out for discussion, but there was a lot that I found on Steampunk. So here you go. Okay, so Alice in Wonderland. I've done this before. So what is your concept?
Just like in the movie.
Just like in the movie. Oh, okay. What are you thinking about that?
Blue dress, Mad Hatter, wild hair.
Okay.
And I want the set to go all the way around like we're enclosed in it.
So you want us, the audience, to be in the movie?
It will be amazing.
Just like in the movie. Oh, okay. Are we doing this like we're watching a movie, or we're in the movie, or about the movie?
Yes.
Are we talking like Tim Burton? Are we going animated? Are we going older?
Yes. All of them in one.
like the movie is always one of our favorite things to hear, but it is said fairly often in theater, and, a lot of directors get inspiration from movie because movies are just a different form of theater. They're just moving pictures. So, with this kind of open-ended prompt that I got, I dove in and picked a few that I was familiar with, and I found some interesting things. Most importantly, the 1933 version of Alice in Wonderland is absolutely terrifying. That is a scary piece of work, so I'm going to leave that stuff on the back burner. But there is an awful lot of productions of Alice in Wonderland that have been done as a movie, as you see from this list. So these days, when people say Alice in Wonderland movies, they generally mean one of the two Disney productions, either the animated or the Burton version, which I guess is technically also animated. So those are the two that I'm going to be focusing on. So we'll take a look first at the animated version. So here we have Alice sitting on a rock in the middle of a clearing. You see that she is the focus. There's a kind of a round area that's well lit where she is, and all the strange little creatures and whatnot are sitting off into the shadows. And you can see that they are very colorful, but they're all kind of cloaked in shadow, and I feel like you can draw a lot of ideas from that, where you have this vibrant landscape, these vibrant things going on, but the whole thing has kind of a mask of shadow around it, and I found that a little bit interesting, and the light seems to be with her. And in a lot of the other images I've seen, the kind of focus and the light follows her, and yes, there's all these wild things going on, but they're all kind of in the background, so I thought that was this is a good image illustrating a lot of my research I found on this. And that can translate to stage. Now this image is interesting because you have these like soldier cards walking around, and they're projecting these very kind of long shadows. Now, it's obvious that this being an animated movie, that there's no actual light source projecting these shadows, and you can do that in animation, but this kind of long shadowy effect is often very overbearing and scary on stage, and it's normally achieved by having footlights. And that causes the subject, the actor, whatever, to cast a very long shadow behind them and up the walls. I've used this effect on like a psych or a scrim, and it makes them loom and makes them dangerous and terrifying. And I see that in this image, these long looming shadows that create sort of this sense of danger. And that's a lot of the Red Queen stuff. It's this. She's this dark, dangerous entity, and here are her soldiers in this dark, long shadows. And that is definitely something that we can do on stage using footlights or whatnot. So I think this is another interesting image for me in my research. Now the Burton production is a lot newer. There's a lot more different screenshots. There's like wallpapers and all kinds of things that have been digitally enhanced. And I noticed in the Burton there was a lot of rays of light, and that was very integrated with a lot of the scenes and a lot of the artwork I found on it. I found some other interesting things, which I'll show you in a second, but let me take a look at one of these here, this one. In this picture we have the Red Queen's chamber, and you can see that it's very backlit. This creates a shadowy interior, and you can see the rays of sunlight coming through the windows, and it's almost like it's nice outside, but it's not in here, which is a very strong theme of the movie. Everyone around her is walking on eggshells and, watching out because she's this dangerous thing, and even her chamber here is kind of dark and dreary, but the light from Wonderland is still trying to creep in, and I think that's a very strong visual. Another thing we could try and replicate on stage. So here's something interesting. The rabbit holes that you can sometimes be led down when doing research. I found this here, and apparently this is the Alice in Wonderland maze in Shanghai Disney, I think it is. Here we have some actual lighting fixtures inspired by the movie. Having a physical representation of an animated movie is a very interesting thing as a lighting designer to take a look at. We can take a closer look at actual fixtures that have been inspired by the movie, and maybe that is something that we can build and have on stage. And so here's an image of a little bit closer. So you see they have this kind of hanging lantern kind of feel, and they're all not all of them, but they're very different from each other. And that is something that I think if I were designing the show for real, I would try and say, we should have this at some point. These hanging fixtures, these kind of glowing shapes that have this vibe to them. And that's something that I would try and replicate on stage. So, Alice in Wonderland, I've done that before. So,
Of course you have.
what is your concept?
1950s.
Okay.
Manhattan.
Manhattan as in...
As in New York.
Okay.
With a little bit of Soviet flair for the Red Queen.
Soviet feel, Red Queen. Got it. And is Manhattan our reality and then we go into Wonderland from there?
No. Manhattan is Wonderland.
Okay.
Reality is Queens.
Okay. And where does this take place in Manhattan? Like Central Park or in the building or?
She makes her way to Central Park, to the garden.
I see. And how are you thinking of doing this in lighting-wise? How do you visualize it?
Colorful, but dark. Shadow, lots of texture.
Colorful but dark, shadowy with lots of texture. Okay. And Queens, how is that going to be different from, I guess, Manhattan, which is Wonderland?
Reality versus conceptual.
Queens is reality.
Yes.
The Red Queen has a Soviet flair?
And like she's from Russia, and she's that powerful woman that has come over from Russia.
Right. Now we have the 1950s director. An interesting choice. Doing an actual time period for Alice in Wonderland, it kind of takes away the dreamlike magical element of it, but not necessarily. So take a look at this image. Look at all the lights. You have movement of the cars, you have the neons, you've got street lights. This has a very kind of Alice in Wonderland magical feel by all these different things going on. It's, again, overwhelming. Now, instead of necessarily being color, you have all these different sources of light that pop out and illuminate the darkness. And I think this image is a very good beginning building block on how to build a 1950s Wonderland. I like the lighting fixture in this image. It is very kind of Wonderland feeling, rounded shapes. And there's a lot of this kind of style in the 1950s, a lot of strange lighting fixtures. And I feel like that is a way that you can make a normal time period feel like a magical place when you use the weird light fixtures that time period had. And these hanging from the ceiling are a very good example to me of something that I would like to put on stage, because it's got this kind of magical whimsy about it. And that's something that research can give you. Now that I saw that in an image, I can do actual research as to what other kind of fixtures they had and what is available to me today. And then you talk with the set designer and you talk with the director on how to integrate that into the show. So one of the other things that was mentioned was the Red Queen. The director prompt was a Cold War Soviet Russia sort of vibe for the Red Queen. And I was like, well, how are you going to get that across with lights? Well, I started doing a little bit of research, and you can see, here are some of the images I found that spoke to me. And I'm sure you can recognize what I recognized after a few images, is that there is a lot of drabness in these images. There is not a lot of color. It is a lot of grays and subdued blues and blacks. There's not a lot of color except for red. The red pops out in these pictures like a sore thumb. And as a designer, that is what I take away from this. So whenever we have the Red Queen on stage, I really want to get anything that is red to pop way stronger than anything else on stage. And I think that's something you can do by highlighting the red and subduing your other colors, and that is definitely something that we can manipulate on stage and could get this red pop that is very reminiscent of this era. And this is definitely the kind of element that you work with a costume designer on, because I'm sure that the guards and the Red Queen are going to have these red accents and whatnot, and this you want to make sure that you don't drown out whatever they're trying to do, but that you enhance the costumes with light. And this is a good example of where I think that would happen. So these are just 3 examples of kind of where you go with research and how it can help you on stage and how images can translate to what you're going to do in the theater. And of course, this is all an ensemble, so you're working with set designers, you're working with costume designers, you're working with a director on all of these elements. And so the next meeting you would go to with the director, you would come with these ideas and concepts being supported by this research that you've done, and you can say, hey, I think that for lights we should try and go this way with your concept because these are the reasons that it kind of fits in. So then you discuss, you put together a plan of how you're going to make these things happen, and that's the design. That's how the research enhances the design of a show. So you're not just putting lights on a stage in the void for no other reason than just to see. That is the first element of lighting design, is you need to be able to see them, but this helps you build everything else that you want to do on stage to make the show really good.
And thus we end this week's program on research. I hope you will join us next week as we delve a little more deeply into the world of triple cross blending.